95.1, 790 AM, KFYO. Mornings here on a Monday it is. And as we do have on many Mondays, we get to visit with our Congressman Jodey Arrington, who is on line one. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. God bless West Texas. How y'all doing?
We're doing all the good. We got Matt Crow subbing for Matt Martin this morning.
How are you, Congressman?
Good, Mr. Crow. I don't have to memorize another name. It's Matt and Dave.
Yeah, just Matt and Dave is still right.
Hey, Congressman, speaking of memorization, how do you see the president's budget shaping up as we go forward? I've been reading a little bit about it over the weekend, and all the Democrats are worried that it's going to be too severe. And I know the president's chief of staff, Nick Mulvaney, is kind of known for his sharp knife when it comes to the budget. I happen to like the sharp knife when it comes to the budget, but how do you think this will shake out going forward for everybody?
Well, in reality, the Democrats being in control of the House and needing 60 votes in the Senate, I have very little hope for a budget that is fiscally responsible. We should have one that is. The House has passed a bill that's balanced the budget in 10 years and reduced the deficit and debt. But, I think that what you're going to see is more spending. I think you're going to see that as a trade to get the military what they need. We had the largest investment in rebuilding the military in the last budget. But the only way the Democrats will let us continue to make sure that our troops have the resources to be safe and successful in doing the most important job is to trade on spending on domestic discretionary programs that, quite frankly, I don't think we have any business being involved in. But so I don't hold a lot of hope for that. We just talked about it, or we haven't talked yet about it, but I've been talking a lot about this 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund that I voted against, not because I'm against the program, but it gave them a blank check, and it also extended the program for 70 years without congressional oversight. So this is the biggest problem, Matt and Dave, in the federal government, and the debt, the mountainous debt that we're going to heave upon our children and grandchildren is the biggest long-term threat to the future of the country.
Well, you got your hands full with the Democrats and the budget. And I thought it was just plain nasty of them to have that bill with a compensation fund and have it open-ended like that. It was just an invitation for disaster, I mean, financially and from a budget perspective. And to put that on the backs of the people who got hurt and got sick from 9/11, I thought was below the belt even for the Democrats. On a lighter note, though, you've got quite an honor. You've been named the co-chair on Ways and Means of the Rural Task Force on rural health challenges, and you probably know better than anybody coming from West Texas what those challenges are. So that's a real that's an honor, and I think a great role for you.
Well, we are honored to be in that leadership role as we try to pull together not just the Band-Aids, because I had an amendment that we included in the Farm Bill that would allow some of these hospitals to refinance at lower interest rates, but that was really just a Band-Aid. We've lost 2 rural hospitals in just my congressional district in the last year. We've lost about 100 since 2010 around the country. Half of the 2,500 hospitals, rural hospitals, are operating at a net loss. So there's a real crisis in healthcare in small-town USA. And if we're going to have the next generation of farmers, ranchers, and energy producers provide the food, fuel, and fiber for our country, we've got to make sure they have access to basic care. And there are lots of things we can do that will be substantive and meaningful. And I hope we can do this in a bipartisan way. This should be a bipartisan issue. And I look forward to giving you all updates as we make progress.
All right, Congressman, it's 7:40. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk more after this break. How about?
You bet.
And we're back here at 7:44 a.m. on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Crow, covering for Matt Martin this morning. And back on the phone with us is Congressman Jodey Arrington.
And hopefully without the bad communication.
Yeah.
Okay, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, it sounds like we have a better connection this time.
I'm sorry about that.
We thought they put you into space or something, and you were phoning it in.
NSA, man, they're trying to shut us down.
The Russians are jamming us again.
The Russians are, that's right. Well, Mueller's the Mueller investigation is now front and center, and Mueller's going to testify, as y'all know. So they probably don't want the truth of how this whole investigated got started. That's what my Republican colleagues are going to focus on is the real collusion and corruption at the DOJ for even having this witch hunt in the first place. But anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's talk about this $15 minimum wage. Of course, I can't imagine that would ever get through of course, the president would veto it and it would never get through the Senate, but the Democrats proposing a $15 minimum wage. I had this crazy thought, Congressman. Why don't the Republicans just propose a $100 minimum wage? and then they would say, well, that's outrageous. Well, it's got as much chance of passing as the $15 wage does. So that's what we're proposing, a $100 minimum wage.
Well, I guess we could pander to workers like Democrats do.
Why not?
Because that's all it is. Look, we have more jobs and we have people to fill them because of free market policies where we put more freedom in the marketplace, less government tax, less government regulations, and now wages are growing faster than they have in over a decade, and the fastest growth and the biggest gains are on the lower end of the income spectrum. So workers are benefiting from the tax cuts and deregulation, and all that more mandates and government intervention is going to do is increase unemployment. The CBO, which is generally underrepresents the impact of these things, says that we'll have almost 4 million jobs lost because of forcing our small business employers and others to increase the minimum wage to $15. It's about a $10 billion hit to our economy. So like a lot of things that the Democrats do, and like socialism and communism, on paper, it might tickle your ears, but in the final analysis, when executed and implemented, it's a disaster.
Yeah, well, the Texas unemployment rate, we just did a story this morning about it, and historic low. Texas unemployment rate continues to fall to 3.4%. So you're right. Everybody that wants a job, at least in Texas, has one.
That's right, and the small business guys are the ones most impacted by this. Regulations are more easily absorbed, and mandates like this are more easily absorbed by the big guys. Yeah. So this is an additional burden to the small guys, which predominantly are job creators in West Texas, and they're really the economic engine of the country. And again, it might sound good, and I know that Democrats are working really hard to try to prove to the worker that they're for them, but the fact is they're not. If they were, they'd be, instead of focusing on the phony sort of Russian collusion deal with Mueller, they'd be trying to pass USMCA, which is going to create 170,000 jobs in this country, and will prevent the sort of moving those jobs to the lowest wage countries, and that's something that I think the unions have already testified that they support. We just can't get Nancy Pelosi to do something that she fears might be a win for the president, even though it's absolutely good for the United States.
Hey, Congressman, speaking of giving the president a win, what have you been telling the ag producers in the district about why the Democrats are stopping this U.S., Canada, Mexico agreement for trade? I mean, it seems to me you must I know you talk to a lot of producers, particularly the dairy producers. I mean, that's so frustrating.
It is, and the dairy guys, as you know, will increase their exports almost 50%, $250 million, because of reducing the trade barriers in Canada. And I just went to a dairy this past weekend, and I talked to producers in Plains, Texas, went to a dairy in Friona. And look, we've seen a 300% increase in ag trade since NAFTA in 1993, since it was signed. The Democrats have said, well, if you take off the steel tariffs against Mexico and Canada, then we'll talk. Well, the president did that. Well, I don't know that Mexico's going to pass this and ratify it. Well, they did. So everything that they've expressed as concerns, I don't know that they were real concerns. I think they were just stonewalling, but all those have been addressed. And like I said, the unions who have come before the committee, Ways and Means, to talk about the impact of USMCA have been incredibly positive, because it's actually better for the worker. So there's really no excuse. There's no substantive reason. It's just, and I've talked to my colleagues on the Democrat side, especially from Texas, folks like Henry Cuellar from Laredo, and they want this as badly as we do. And like I said, 170,000 jobs, about $70 billion in economic impact all the way around. It's purely political, and I think it's a miscalculation because I think folks who put the Democrats in to sort of have a divided government expected more bipartisan, constructive problem solving and legislation. We've gotten completely the opposite of that.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, though. It is going to come back and bite them, because every single manufacturing association across the United States, that includes Detroit, very heavily Democrat, but Reagan Democrats, going to come back to bite them, because what effectively they're doing is they're sitting on the job creation. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Well, you're right, and one of the big concerns for the unions, especially in the auto manufacturing industry, was the low cost of labor that was the giant sucking sound from NAFTA on auto workers and auto manufacturing being moved to Mexico. Well, that has been equalized. So we have now a much more level playing field on the issue of how the labor standards, environmental standards. And so that's going to bode well for the U.S. worker, not just our economy, but for the U.S. worker in the manufacturing sector. You're right. So there's really no reason now. We know it's purely political, and like infrastructure, like rural health care and other things that the American people expected the Democrats to work on with Republicans in this Congress, they've seen nothing of the sort, and I think between that and the leftist socialist agenda that they have been passing, at least on the House floor, I think they'll pay dearly. I hope, Matt, we get the House back and we can help this president for another 4 more years make America great.
Amen.
Yeah. Congressman, that about wraps up our time. We're up against the clock, and as always, it's good to talk to you on these Monday get-togethers that we have. Thanks for calling in.
Likewise. Thank you, Dave. Good to hear from you, Matt.
Good luck, Congressman.